Welcome to Shout Your Cause with Sally Hendrick, a digital magazine where you can get found, get heard, and get inspired with content that challenges us to be globally minded. Our focus is on raising awareness around social justice issues, cultural differences, and to bring you the people dedicating their lives to tackling challenging topics as their way of giving back. Let us be your advocate to make your voices heard around the world. Hey everybody, this is Sally Hendrick with Shout Your Cause, and I am super excited today to have Kate Lincoln Goldfinch with me, an attorney, an immigration attorney from Austin, Texas. Hello, Kate, welcome.
Hi, Sally. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm very excited that we were able to finally get together and do this. I've been following you actually on TikTok, but I noticed that you're on a lot of other social media channels as well. But you are talking about a topic that is close to my heart because I do have a lot of friends and what I would call family, even though they're not blood related, that have been caught in different situations when it comes to immigration. So I want to talk through some of those things. So why don't you give me a little bit of background about you and tell me, kind of what you were doing?
Sure. So I am an immigration lawyer and I've been doing it now for about 15 years. I'm native to Austin, Texas, and I went to law school thinking I wanted to do, public interest, social justice work. And I took the immigration clinic, because I wanted to practice my Spanish. And I, was very naive, didn't know much about immigration. I thought at that time in my life, that America is a land of immigrants and we celebrate diversity. And I just believed all of that. That was my reality around me. And my first assignment as a law student attorney was to go to a detention center near Austin and to do an intake with a family of Iraqi asylum seekers. And it was a mother and a father. They were young and they had a little baby girl who was 5 months old. And they were all wearing prison uniforms, including the little baby. And during that meeting, the mom, I was taking their story and the mom asked me if I would hold her baby because she said, "You smell like the outside." And so I was holding this baby, and at the end of the meeting, the mom asked me if I would take her with me. Could I sneak her out and take care of her until they could get out of there? And I've told this story a lot at this point in my life, and I still get emotional when I tell it, because it was just that moment changed my life, because it really it sort of disintegrated everything that I believed about America and immigration. And then I wasn't able to help them in that moment, but I did get to represent them as a student attorney and win their asylum case and get them out of detention. And then I was completely hooked on doing asylum work. And I did asylum work with families in detention for several years. And now I've expanded to doing more just generalized immigration work. But because I'm an immigration attorney in Texas and my heart is connected to the cause of migrants, I've been involved throughout the years in all of the things that we've all heard about, like family detention and family separations and unaccompanied migrant kids. And I've had a, frontline view of that stuff as an immigration lawyer in Texas.
And that's unique because most people don't ever experience that side of the coin. All they get is what they see on the media or what they think they are experiencing, maybe with neighbors or kids in school or whatever that may be. And they don't actually realize what is happening in these detention centers. And that's pretty amazing. That story is very touching, obviously, with the Iraqi family. What year was that?
That would have been in around 2006 or 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
Yeah. And now I've had, many, many more stories just like it.
So what are some of the steps that people have to take when they are seeking asylum?
So it's changed a lot recently, within the last administration. One critical thing to understand about asylum is that the statute requires that an asylum seeker be here. They have to be at our border or inside our country to even apply for asylum. Refugees, that's different. Somebody who is, given status in a refugee camp and comes here with legal status is different than an asylum seeker. And we as a nation recognized our responsibility to protect people fleeing persecution after our failure to do so during World War II. When we sort of famously turned away this ship of 900 Jewish refugees fleeing the Holocaust, and we sent them back to their death. And there was this global reckoning after that, including in our nation, about what are we going to do differently next time. And so we signed on to international treaties recognizing our responsibility, and we codified the asylum laws into our system 40 years ago in 1980. And we've had this system in place for decades and decades where asylum seekers who come to the border are put through a screening interview. It's called a credible fear interview, and they tell their story to an asylum officer. And if they tell a story that could potentially qualify them for asylum, then they get released and they prepare for asylum hearing before an immigration judge. And it's important to mention that over 90% of asylum seekers who pass a credible fear interview show up for their court hearings. So there's often this, fake statistic thrown out there that asylum seekers abscond, and that is not supported by the data. So we've had this credible fear system for years and years and years, and people who don't qualify, who don't pass the interview, get deported. But it's been a fair and functioning asylum screening system that we've had in place. And it was completely dismantled and torn apart under the previous administration, systematically. I mean, there were multiple attempts to dismantle the asylum system, and ultimately the administration was successful. Now what it looks like is the border is essentially completely closed to asylum seekers, except for children, unaccompanied minors. But families seeking asylum, Venezuelans, Cubans, there's a group of Haitians now, all of the communities or the people who are fleeing incidents in their country are just being turned away. And what it has created is this population of vulnerable migrants from all over the globe on the Mexican side of the border, which has drawn the cartels. And it is so routine for migrants to be kidnapped by the cartels that there's stories about, tell them it's your second court date because they only kidnap the people who have the first court date. I mean, it's like, it just is really, really unfortunate that a functioning system was dismantled and has created chaos and death and complete and utter torture and terror in people's lives. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I represented a woman and her daughter earlier this year who she's a single mom. She fled violence in El Salvador. She came to the border with her 8-year-old daughter. They were turned away because of the current policies. They were kidnapped, and the little girl escaped. And she miraculously was able to cross the border, and she became one of these unaccompanied migrant kids. And that's when I met her, and we all thought her mom was dead. Then her mom escaped. We were able to get her mom across and reunite them. But they went through 6 weeks of separation, most of which during most time, the daughter thought her mom had died, and the mother was subjected to unspeakable horror. She still can't even really recount them during her time kidnapped. And none of that would have happened had we had our previous policies in place.
Would you rather work or would you rather play? If we're going to go through all of this business building stuff, it better be for something that we love doing, right? Take a moment to do this quick life purpose challenge to discover what makes you truly happy. It's free. Visit sallyhendrick.com/life purpose.
So what is being done right now with the new administration to try to, can they reverse that? What are they trying to fix it? What's happening?
I mean, a little. The administration has done a little, but not enough, in my opinion. I'll just be very honest. I think that they should be doing more. I think it's actually quite simple. All we need to do is go back to the system that we had in place. But instead, what we see is the Biden administration lifts the Title 42, which is the the final death knell to Asylum was because of the border closures due to COVID. And I'll just note that the Trump administration attempted the same closures based on mumps before COVID existed. It didn't succeed. And then they had COVID and it became this opportunity to finally close the borders. But Biden lifted Title 42 closures only as it pertains to children. The result of that has been that, yes, many unaccompanied migrant kids who were in danger were able to cross, but also many kids who are with their families and are in danger are being sent across alone because they can get to safety even though their parents can't. I know a woman, a single mom of 5 kids, sent her 5 kids across alone. The littlest one was toddling, under 2 years old. The oldest one was 13 years old. And this poor woman had to send her kids across the border alone to safety because that was her only choice. And I think that the Biden administration needs to just lift Title 42 completely. It's a farce. COVID safety is not a reason to close the borders. We can conduct COVID testing. Migrants are not the culprits for the spread of the virus in the United States. And so I think there have been little actions here and there by the Biden administration, but overall, it has not been nearly the level of action that I would hope to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't understand why some governors have tried to blame their COVID numbers on immigrants. It's ridiculous to do that.
It's mad.
I mean, it's like, look outside the window. Your neighbor is doing this. It's not immigrants' fault that this is happening. It's the policies or the lack thereof and the narrative around this being some sort of freedom taking stance when it comes to mitigations around COVID.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Abbott simultaneously prevented or attempted to prevent mask mandates in schools in Texas, and also blames asylum seekers for COVID. And it's like, you can't have both. Which one is it? It's very, very, very frustrating to be a rational person living in Texas right now.
I can imagine. I can only imagine. So it's not very different in Tennessee, which is where I am. And apparently we are right now number 1 in the nation when it comes to daily cases for new COVID spread. And I do know just firsthand that it's finally reaching a lot of the rural areas. You've got Nashville and you've got Memphis, which are, more tightly packed and tend to be a little more liberal cities. And, they've done really well with the policies and things to handle COVID as best as they can. But the rural areas have really been just throw caution to the wind, if you will, and not really paying attention to it that much. But it's finally gotten to them. I like to use the analogy that, let's say you've got a rose garden and it's a big rectangle and you are watering one end of it. And that one end of it is like the most compact city where the spread would be, the fastest and the biggest. And eventually, though, the water is going to saturate the rest of the garden, but it takes quite some time before it gets there. And I believe that that's what's happening now, which is why we've moved in that direction. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is that I love the fact that you speak Spanish. Hablo español también. I went to school in Spain.
Oh, cool.
But it was so long ago, back in the early 90s. And I got a minor in Spanish in college. So when you studied Spanish, because I know you speak really well, probably way better than I do, because you actually get to use it a lot. Right? Mm-hmm. So did you learn in school? Did you, tell me more about your history with Spanish.
I did learn in school. My dad was raised in Paraguay and Costa Rica. So he's, totally fluent Spanish speaker, but my mom doesn't speak Spanish. And so it just wasn't easy in the home. And I never learned it as a kid. But I think because my dad was fluent, it gave me enough motivation. My friends were like taking French and taking sign language and taking all the cool languages. And I wanted to do that too. But I was like, blinders on, I am going to speak Spanish. And I think it's probably because I wanted to be like my dad. And just like you, I didn't technically minor in it, but I basically did, in college. Yeah. And then, it was that experience in the immigration clinic where I decided I was going to be an immigration lawyer, and I did some traveling. And now 15 years into it, the majority of my clients are Spanish speakers. So most of the work that I do is in Spanish, when I'm talking to clients and when I'm doing my radio show and stuff like that. So I have really good Spanish when I'm talking about immigration. But if I were to tell you about my rose garden, it would be a little bit of a challenge.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Turn what you know into what you do. Join the platform with the most ways to monetize what you know, whether it's online courses, coaching, memberships, podcasts, newsletters, communities, or more. Kajabi gives you all the tools you need to build, market, and sell it with just a few clicks. Sign up at sallyhendrick.com/Kajabi. That's Kajabi.
So you have a radio show. Why don't you tell me, what is that called? And what is it? You have call letters?
I do. I have 2 weekly radio shows. One is on La Ley in Waco, and the other is on Kayla Radio in Austin. And it's the same name for the shows. It's called El Show Sin Fronteras, which is the show without borders. And we stream it all on our Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. All the shows are streamed. We're streaming on TikTok, but they cut our access. I don't know. I can't figure that out. But anyway, the idea is to give updates to our followers, many of whom are immigrants, about all of the shifting policies. And it's, you'd think we'd run out of topics doing an hour's worth of content every week, but we do not. There is always something new to talk to people about. And
are you loading that up on a podcast as well?
We just, my team they've been talking to me about doing a podcast, and I'm like, okay, great, go for it. I don't know how to do that. And so one of the shows, the one on Kayla Radio, we're going to start repackaging it for a podcast. So maybe you and I could talk about tips.
Yeah, let's chat, because there's some software and stuff that you can use too that makes it a lot easier to kind of disseminate everything. And it can go, it can be podcast, YouTube, whatever. I don't personally do it. I've been in there to mess with it, but I've got an assistant who handles it because I've got a lot to do just to keep these interviews going.
I'm sure. Yes.
But yeah, the technical end of it can sometimes be a little bit hairy, but it's nice when you get that flow going, and then it goes out to the podcast channels. And then that, I feel like that also creates this, a much larger draw, because you will have people who love to listen to podcasts, and that's just so easy for them to do. They don't always have time to sit there and look at their phone, but they might want to listen to a podcast in their car or while they're working or whatever they're doing. So
yeah,
definitely.
Okay, that's more of a push for me to get it done. So
yeah, definitely do it, because you can really expand your numbers there as far as the number of people that are following you. And I'm assuming do you get some of that on your website as well?
We do. Yeah. There's a whole system in place.
Whole system.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. That's awesome. And that helps too, because then you're searchable online. So when people are looking for information, they're going to find you, and you get to serve more people in that way, because obviously we know that we can't always serve every individual we want to help. But if we can serve in a bigger way where more people are touched, then it makes a big difference.
I like that perspective. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I want to help everybody. I work with a lot of life coaches that are helping people with different types of things to overcome, business coaches, et cetera, as well. But this is really interesting. So I think that it would be helpful. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is a lot of people have this idea in their head that immigrants just come here illegally and then they just try to take from the system. And it really creates a horrible narrative around somebody's real, true story. And when people hear the real stories, they have more empathy. But then they still can go back to this. It's almost like a political narrative that will just destroy it. So I would love to hear from you what maybe a typical pattern is for someone who comes here and then gets stuck in the system that we have, because it needs a lot of cleanup.
Sure, absolutely. I have a lot to say about that. And there's sort of this joke amongst my colleagues about, we get the call from, somebody who is wanting to help their lawn guy or their nanny or their contractor. And the conversation is always about how great, how wonderful this person is. If you know them, you'd love them, and I've had that conversation 1,000 times with people. And what people don't realize is that that's the reality of the majority of the people that I work with. This is not your nanny is not the exception in my experience, and so I think even the people who have been exposed to one or two or a handful of undocumented immigrants and were thoroughly impressed by their ingenuity and their work ethic and what good, kind-hearted, honest people they were, hopefully will begin to understand that that is the pattern of the type of people who are so brave that they leave everything they know behind for whatever reason. Maybe they had to, maybe there was a hurricane, maybe something wasn't safe, or maybe they just are a dreamer, and they see this incredible nation of the United States with all of this opportunity for people who are willing to work hard, and take advantage of the opportunity presented to them. And they do it. They get here somehow and they start a business. Immigrants actually, the data shows, create jobs. They don't take jobs. And so they come here and I don't know, they open up a, convenience store, they start another business, or they're just amazing and contribute so much to the fabric of this country. And it is so true that we are the only nation on this entire planet that is built on that idea that people from all over fit in and are American, and that is how this nation has developed. And that is how we're built out. I mean, it's like, it just is the truth. But there has always been in our history, which is very short, this idea of xenophobia or immigrants, whatever, bring disease, they're dangerous, they're lazy, they take things, they're a drain on the system. And it started, in the first 100 years of this nation. Of course, I'm not even touching on, the issue of slavery or of natives, but the first people who came to this country were white and they were Protestant and they spoke English. So the Catholics, the Irish, I mean, there are cartoons of Irish depicted as apes, swinging barrels of rum over their head with knives in their hands. They were accused of all the same things that immigrants of today are accused of. Italians, Jews, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. The stories just repeat themselves, but at the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, we had the railroad companies had gone to China to bring laborers over. The railroad gets completed. There's a slight downturn in the economy. Some white laborers can't find work, and the scapegoat for that are Chinese workers, Chinese immigrants. So because the West is more powerful now after the completion of the railroad, they are able to get the Chinese Exclusion Act, which for 80 years banned Chinese immigration to the United States, all because there was a slight downturn in the economy. And I'm certain that none of those people actually ran the data and the reports about whether this group of Chinese immigrants was actually taking jobs away from them. So it's all regurgitated rhetoric about immigrants that's false, but there's always been these camps, the camp of xenophobia and anybody other than us is wrong. And then there's always been the camp of America is diverse and diversity is beautiful. And the data and the science is on that side also about what it means for the health of our nation to have people coming in from all over the globe and bringing their talents to us.
Do you want to stand out from the crowd with your content? Come discover how to market yourself as an expert, as a change maker, as a positive influence on other people's lives. With the Exponential Marketing Club, you will learn the ins and outs of content marketing that makes a difference in the world. Visit sallyhendrick.com/club.
Now, what happens though when it comes to, let's say someone comes here and they are on a work visa, or they're on, I have a friend who was on a 10-year work visa, which is pretty much like an invitation to come and create a life here. And then you can get your green card and do all the things you're supposed to do. But they hit so many hiccups in the system that if you signed up for this particular thing, it made you not eligible for this. And then if you did this, you had to wait 10 years, or you had to wait 2 years, you had to do this or whatever. And it was so complicated that I was just like, how do you navigate this? And a lot of people either give up or they overextend their visa, and then they're considered undocumented at that point, right? And it's a mess. How do you even untangle that?
Yeah, more than half of the undocumented population now entered legally. And that's really because after 9/11, the border shut down. The border has not been porous since 2005. It's been closed since then, despite what a lot of people would have us think. Most people who are here without status came in on a visa and got caught in the web in some form or fashion. And it is the immigration code and the Immigration Nationality Act is as complex as the tax code. I mean, what immigration lawyers do is same level of complexity as tax attorneys. It, like you said, there's so many little pitfalls, loopholes, changes in policy. I mean, in fact, when I was exploring becoming an immigration lawyer, I did some informational interviews with other lawyers. And one of the things I really wanted in a career path was something that was going to always keep my interest. I didn't want to learn something and then do that thing that I had learned for the rest of my life. I wanted to always be learning. And it was real clear to me that in immigration, I was never going to just know it all, and that that's a plus side for me in that small area because it keeps me interested, but also it's a big downside for most immigrants that the system is as opaque and complex as it is, because people they get themselves into trouble without realizing it.
Yeah, and they do. And it's a problem because then they do have to hire an attorney to try to untangle the mess and see what they can or cannot do. And it's very complicated. Not only is it complicated for anyone to understand, imagine doing that and English isn't your first language. I'm sure though that a lot of the materials do come with Spanish translations, but I will mention a few years ago, I helped a friend of mine to get her oldest son on DACA for the Dreamer program. Her youngest child was born here. Her middle child and her oldest were not born here. But the only one that was eligible at the time was the oldest child. And the forms, it was scary. She was like, please help me with this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she goes, we can't mess it up, because if we mess it up, then we lose our chance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the responsibility. It was really frightening. And we were going to talk with an attorney about it, but the timing wasn't right. And we didn't have enough time to get it all done. We did get it to go through, and he was able to get his status with that.
Awesome.
But after several years of issues with healthcare problems. Her husband broke his hand. He lost his job. There's, all these different things that were happening. It seemed like they kept running into one problem after another. They finally just loaded all their stuff up and moved back to Belize.
Do you have a dog? Learn unleashed potential dog training secrets with Duke Ferguson. This free video series will get you pro training tips so you can get your dog's attention, eliminate behavioral problems, and enhance your relationship in just 20 minutes a day. Sign up at sallyhendrick.com/dog training.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is an unfortunate outcome of a lot of our policies, is that people give up.
And they had the 10-year work visas,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally were about a year over them when all their problems just started happening, and they just could not get it to work out.
Mm-hmm.
It was very sad.
Yeah.
But as far as I know that we're going to try to wrap things up right now. The last thing I'd like to talk about is what is your hope for the future with this? What do you see on the horizon that is the silver lining, the good thing that may be coming? Or what do you hope for, at least?
Well, we do have a provision for the Dreamers in the new budget reconciliation bill that's headed through Congress. And because it's part of the budget, 3/5 instead of a 3/5 majority, just a simple majority is needed to get it passed. And there's some, because it's the budget, there's some ways that make it easier to get it through. And I'm hopeful that we might actually see something for the Dreamers. Which is a small sliver of the population, an important one, but a very small sliver of the population. I mean, I am still hopeful that we will have comprehensive immigration reform. We have a large undocumented population in the United States. Anyone who crunches the numbers acknowledges that it's not even feasible. It would be vastly harmful and detrimental to us to try to deport everyone. We can't. And so therefore, given that understanding, even if you come at it from the Republican angle, it makes more sense to offer legal status to these people so that they get a social security number, file their 1040s, come out of the shadows, regardless of which side you're on. That makes more sense if we can all just acknowledge that it's not possible. Of course, on my side, I also don't think it's humane. But I think we need immigration reform that acknowledges the population that's here, addresses the backlogs in the family and employment-based immigration system so that we don't have these ridiculous 20-year waits for brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens to be able to immigrate here. That's absurd. And then I think we finally need to get honest with ourselves about the fact that this is a growing economy. It's an aging population that has a need for immigrant labor and will continue to have a need for immigrant labor. And therefore, our laws need to acknowledge and allow for immigrants to come in. What we have had for 40 years instead is a reality of an economy that needs immigrant labor, but a Congress and a legal system that doesn't acknowledge that. So we sort of wink, wink, invite immigrants to come in and work, even though they're undocumented, because there's plenty of jobs for them, but there's no legal way for them to do that because the laws don't keep up with the reality. So it's just absurd. We need to fix it. When that happens, I cannot answer that for you. There have been many times over the years, I keep thinking it's going to happen, but I think 9/11 was, really, really set us back in terms of xenophobia and starting the division about immigration.
Well, I'm hopeful that something will come about in this administration now. Unfortunately, COVID has kind of created this huge interrupter to everything. But in a way, it's also been a catalyst to really bring out the truth from a lot of people. I mean, you see things now today in a different light. A lot of people are paying attention that weren't before. A lot of people were sleepy to the reality around them. And now they're like, okay, there's a lot of problems we have in this country. We're not as on the ball as we think we are or have been. And a lot of people did know that, but now it's coming out and being made more obvious to the rest of us. Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we're only just beginning to see how much of a catalyst this pandemic has been. It certainly has been for me in my practice and my life. But and I look forward to seeing the social progress that comes out of this as a result of this. So
me too.
lining.
Well, thank you very much. I really have enjoyed talking with you today, and I can't wait to share this episode. We get it out there in just a couple of weeks. So everybody, thank you very much for listening to Shout Your Cause today. And thank you to Kate Lincoln Goldfinch. And we will have some show notes on the website and links to Kate's information online and on social media. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening today. My name is Sally Hendrick. Be sure to visit our website for show notes and more information on how you can inspire others. If you would like to contribute content to our magazine, please apply on our website at shoutyourcause.com.